Let me welcome all of you to Chat with Matt. The purpose of Chat with Matt is to find people with something interesting to say. And today we have Brian Frohn, who is I've had several hours of conversations with, and we're going to be talking about everybody needs a coach. Brian's going to talk to us about all the things that go into what he's trying to accomplish as an executive coach. And I think you'll find what he has to say to be of great interest. He has a nice style, and I think you'll enjoy our conversation. I do these as a conversation because I don't believe in death by PowerPoint. The problem in today's world with Zoom is if you have slides up, you're really not in the picture. And I think our guest speaker is the star of the whole show here. And so we're going to get started by him introducing himself. I have been to many meetings where I was a guest speaker, and I have found over the years that everyone butchers my introduction so badly that I'm cringing by the time I get to speak. So I found it's best just to let my guest speaker introduce themselves and tell all of you what you should know about him. So Brian, why don't you get started here and introduce yourself? Our classic 90-second announcement, but of course you can take as much time as you want because you're the guest speaker.
All right. Thanks, Matt. I really like all of this stardom that you've bestowed upon me. And I won't, I'll try to not follow up on the paper bag story. I know at least a couple of people on this call that might have wanted to make a comment, but I'm glad you didn't, Oreste. Okay, so I started my career as a CPA, like many of us, in a small public accounting firm. And pretty shortly after I got my CPA license, I went right into corporate. My first job in corporate was, I think, senior accountant, and I ended up moving up the line. And then 20 years hence, I served as CFO at 5 different companies. I served as CEO at one of them, and doing many different things, of course, in those roles, but mostly helping CEOs, boards, and executive teams grow businesses, meet financial and governance objectives, and business integrations. I did a lot of work with companies integrating into divisions and structures, pulling companies together, and that's a lot of cultural and change management. And now I'm helping leaders. I'm helping executives. I'm executive coaching, leadership coaching, however you want to put it, and just helping leaders take their performance to the next level.
Okay, so why don't you start with what we're going to try to accomplish in this session? You know, the classic, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them.
Sure, right. I mean,
why don't we talk about what we're going to try to accomplish today?
Yeah, I think if we come away with really 3 things. One, if you don't have a coach or you've never had executive coaching, come away with an understanding of what it is, maybe an appreciation for it that you hadn't had in the past. If you do have a coach, thinking about how you can leverage those relationships. Number 2, I am a big believer in Stoicism. I'm a student of Stoicism. I'm not a Stoic. I can't say that, but I do appreciate the teaching. So hopefully this gives you a little bit more of a view on what Stoicism is, and maybe a curiosity to learn more about it and how it can help you. And 3, some things you can do, some tactical tools and approaches to self-coaching if you don't have a coach or you can't get a coach, or even in between coaching sessions, some things that I have found helpful to sort of self-coach and self-manage.
Yeah, I think one thing you might want to talk about before we really get started here is how leaders often find themselves isolated.
Yeah, that's right, Matt. And you and I have talked about that. One of the biggest values of having a coach, which is, as we say, the point of this meeting, is to talk about why I believe and why we believe a coach is helpful to leaders, because leadership is a lonely position, whether you're a CEO or a CFO or whatever position you're in. It's likely that your team and the people you're leading aren't going to give you the real insight and feedback into how you're impacting them. We've all read The Emperor's New Clothes and that book, or maybe not all of us have, but that exemplifies what I think Matt's talking about, which is leadership is a lonely position in that you're not going to get the good feedback and the direct sort of mirror to yourselves that you might. So I think that's a really important aspect of what a coaching relationship does, is help you as a leader see how you're impacting those that you're leading.
Yeah. Why don't you talk about the different kinds of companies where leaders are more likely to need a coach than not?
Yeah,
Just to set the background here, we're going through what I believe to be a very unusual period of time with tremendous change. We've been through almost 20 years with no inflation, and the list goes on from there. The supply chain issues right now, the division in our country. I think these are challenging times.
Yeah, absolutely challenging times. And I think really any company who wants to help their leaders and wants to help the people they're leading can use coaching. Now, it depends. A very small company might have different budgets. And so depending on size of budget, that may be a little limiting for very small companies. But aside from that, any company who wants to invest in their people, who wants to help the people being led as well as the leaders, can consider a coaching relationship for their leaders to be helpful. I think I've seen, and we've all had good bosses and bad bosses and bosses we liked and bosses we didn't like. And we know the impact that those leaders have on us as people being led and the organization. So it's really, to me, the coaching relationship is helping the leader, but it's even more so helping those that are being led and the rest of the organization. And I think any organization that wants to be better and achieve goals more effectively and have people more engaged and invest in their leaders and their people should consider having coaching relationships.
Has Zoom, in your opinion, helped this situation, or has it made it worse?
Well, I mean, I think there's two types of people, right? Those that are sort of into video conferencing and those that really want to get back to in person. And maybe there's a third type of those that are in the middle. But I think for me, it has helped in a way in that it can expand the audience. I can talk to 10 people a day on a Zoom call that I couldn't in person. Now, the depth of the relationship, I think, can be impacted. So when we have a coaching relationship that starts online and for the most part, many of the sessions are online, I do want to meet in person. So, but I have clients in New Jersey and Florida and West Coast. So, at Kansas, am I going to have every session in person? No, but we do want to have that. So I think, in the organization I work for, have been global organizations. Even pre-COVID, there's always been people on the phone, on the video, people in different cities and different time zones. I think that's just the reality of what we're working with now. And I think it does open up more opportunity to see more people and have more convenience in connecting with people if you can also incorporate that personal relationship. But maybe you can do that in a different way or do it less frequently. So I think it's allowed kind of more of an open market and ability to help more people.
Early in my career, I had a boss who had a coach. He was actually I don't know if he was a psychiatrist, but he was certainly a psychologist. And we used to have management meetings out of the office. And I observed how important it was for this particular person, because he was all over the place, to have a coach who held him to account. Because none of us could, because he was the boss.
That's right, and that's what you're talking about in the leadership dynamic. It's hard for you as the person being managed or led to help the leader be better for you, and a lot of times it's hard for the leader to see that. I mean, I think most leaders have some idea of, maybe this person was micromanaging or whatever he or she was doing, have some idea of what they're doing, but they don't appreciate the effect or understand the full effect. And they need help, figuring out new ways to react to that. So exactly. And I think that's one of the benefits of having a coach, is just that the team see that the leader is open to doing things differently, to taking feedback. to getting
Oh,
help.
great.
And that just by itself helps. Even if you don't make any progress, you think, okay, this is good. They're open to this. They're vulnerable and trying to, they're open to change.
So, before everybody gets confused about Stoicism and how you're using that as one of your tools, the two tools that I found very interesting from our discussion, the two tools that you told me you use, Stoicism, perhaps you can spend a few minutes discussing the aspects of it that you find important to your thinking about how you coach. And I know you use Myers-Briggs.
Yeah, great. No, yeah, Stoicism is just something that I've long been interested in. It's a philosophy. For those of you who don't know, it's an ancient Greek philosophy started by guys named Zeno and Cato and all that. I don't have the full history of who started it, but one of the most famous Stoics is Marcus Aurelius, who's a emperor of Rome. And really, to me, it's a real practical philosophy that helps people, give a guide towards a happy and successful life through virtue, through being calm, through a code of ethics, through really thinking about things rationally and trying to take emotion that we all feel and use. And a lot of times I get into debate about emotions, but emotions, you can't avoid how you're feeling, but you can change what you do and how you react. So, a couple great quotes, Stoic quotes are always helpful in understanding Stoicism. So, we don't control what happens, but we do control how we react. That's, a very common Stoic theme and quote. Another one is, which I really like this one, instead of trying to succeed and focusing on success, focus on being deserving of success. So the focus turns to what I'm doing and how I'm acting and behaving will ultimately lead me to success versus going straight for success and not focusing on how you're behaving and what you're doing. To be calm is the highest achievement of oneself. That's a Stoic quote. I believe that. I think we all want to be more calm, and we know how.
No, I very much agree with that. That a lot of people pass on the stresses that their boss gives them. They pass it on. And I think in my being chief financial officer of an advertising agency, my boss had a volatile temper at times, and whatever he told me, I passed on without emotion.
Right, and in him or her passing that on to you, how does that affect your home life, even your life, your wife, Peggy, your children? I mean, you bring home the baggage of that. And so that's why I like to say that helping leaders helps the entire organization and even their families and friends. And it's so pervasive, the effect that leaders have. It's the ultimate privilege and responsibility.
We all learned from the Godfather movie. It's only about business. Kaboom.
That's right. It's just about business. But if you
This
want
is business, this is not personal.
If you want your business to be as successful as possible, you've got to have the best leadership you can. And we're all flawed and we all make mistakes. And just those subtle differences make a big difference.
They certainly do. Myers-Briggs.
Yeah, Myers-Briggs.
I know it's one of many tools, but maybe you can discuss the various tools you considered and maybe tell us why you picked this one. You're just trying to baseline people, as I understood it.
Yeah, exactly. I think we've all taken these personality tests, Myers-Briggs or DISC or predictive index. Those are there's a bunch of them. I'm not aware of all of them, but there's a bunch. And some of them are pretty good. But I think Myers-Briggs has a really good reputation for being a pretty seriously studied tool. The results are well documented in that when people take the exam and they get the report, they very often nod their head and agree. And I think a lot of us in this call will probably can attest when you've taken your test, whether it's Myers-Briggs or not, and you read it, you say, oh yeah, that's me. And you knew that, but it's also helpful to really see that. And that's the power. And then it also, Myers-Briggs will help you understand others. So if you're in a team and you're starting to see, I'm a introvert, I'm an INTJ, that's my Myers-Briggs preference letters. And I can see someone's the opposite, or I can even now, when you're familiar with one of these tools, like I'm familiar with Myers-Briggs, I
Yeah.
start to sort of like see people and try to understand their differences. Oh, okay. Matt's maybe an extrovert. He likes to go out and talk to people. Okay. I'm more of an introvert. This is about how we might interact. So it helps shine a light or a mirror to yourself and appreciate the differences of others. So any of these tools are great. I picked Myers-Briggs. I think it has a great reputation. It's a bit more robust in its test and the questions. It takes a little bit more rigor into it.
Well, it's important not to label people, right? But and my wife, who is on this call, is now an expert in unconscious bias. You don't want to get her started on that. But in any case, it's important as a manager, I think, if you put your troops through a Myers-Briggs test, you might better understand some of the people who work for you. Maybe there are some subtleties you're not catching. In the rush of trying to keep the company in business and make payroll on Friday.
Well, that's right. And I think you made a great point, Matt. In the Myers-Briggs certification, we say, these are your preferences. So I might have mistakenly said you're an extrovert, but I should have said you may prefer extroversion. And that doesn't mean you're always going to be one way or the other. It just means you may have a tendency to get energy from being with people that maybe people who prefer introversion or not. But you're right. And it's tricky because some of the tools, you go out and you've seen this happen. People will take the test and everyone puts the sign on the door, hey, I'm an EFTJ and I'm an IN. We really don't promote that at Myers-Briggs, because you really want to be careful with the labeling. But if you as a team decide you all want to share, that you could do as a group, but you really have to be careful, to your point, of labeling, because I've seen how many, I think probably some of us on this call have seen this done. I've been in these exercises as a management team before. And the leader's like, well, I'm looking for some ENTJs, or I'm looking for some extroverted, Ps, and they have a profile that they are kind of looking for, and everyone in the room starts to realize that. So that can be really dangerous.
I happen to agree with you, Brian. I think it's that I place people in jobs. So I have a search practice, and only a handful of my clients do psychological testing, but I think it's misplaced. Everybody can be successful. Maybe you can weigh in on this. My opinion is that if you're accepting of your Myers-Briggs results, that you're more likely to be successful. And everybody can be successful. There could probably even be an introverted salesperson.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point. I don't like to see, and Myers-Briggs would agree, being used in a an evaluation or a decision to hire someone, because to your point, all types of people can be successful in all types of roles. It's really important that you use it for understanding yourself and understanding others, not as any kind of assessment or a promotion or hiring criteria.
Mark Crowley has put a note in about diversity and variety in the workforce. I think the big word today is diversity, equity, and inclusion. I do diversity, inclusion, and equity because then you can abbreviate it DIE, but that's just me. He doesn't go for that. But
I don't know if that abbreviation is working. I think
it's important to have different kinds of people involved in everything, because everyone comes at it differently, in part because of their presumed or preferences on Myers-Briggs, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why every person is unique, every situation is unique, and every leader is unique. There's a lot of commonality as we go through, and that's why I think some experience, that's why in my coaching, my experience as CFO and CEO is helpful, but really it comes down to the individual and what answers lie within them and what they're looking for and what works. So absolutely, there's uniqueness across, and everybody can be an outstanding leader in their own way. It just depends on what's right for them.
So why don't we get started? You gave me a list of questions. I think they're very good ones. What are the reasons people don't get a coach?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I found is people who don't have coaches are they haven't seen it in action. They're not really familiar with what it is. Maybe they think about it as couples therapy or counseling for only the real troubled. Some people are afraid to really look at themselves. They know that there's going to be a mirror, and that's either challenging or they don't think it's necessary. Some people just haven't been offered it as a resource. A lot of people can't afford coaching on their own, and their company's not offering it. But those are, a couple of the main reasons that people don't, that I've found people don't have coaches.
So if you're faced with a crisis, that might be a good time to have a coach.
Yeah, I mean, a crisis is absolutely a good time, but I think really coaching,
Or is it then too late?
Well, I don't think it's too late. I don't think it's too late, but I would
Just
say,
so you know, Brian and I are both sailors. So the rule is, if you're now thinking about shortening sail, it's probably too late.
that's
Is that not true? Right?
that's absolutely.
Sailing is a metaphor for life.
Well, I think but it's too late, but you still need to do it unless it's dangerous. So,
right. Okay.
now you've put yourself in a deeper hole, but you still have to get it done. So I think I've always had coaching afforded to me in my companies. I've been lucky, and I've had coaches throughout my career, and it's been a benefit. It's been offered to the team, the key high potentials, leaders, others in the organization, to help them. It's an investment. It's an investment in the development of a manager and a leader. I think that's the number one reason to have a coach. I think the relationship is absolutely unique. You can't replicate it. You can't, you can talk to your spouse about stuff, but he or she may not be really familiar with the situation, or be a professional coach, or even have any understanding of what you're going through. So you can get some empathy, sympathy. Your boss isn't going to be the best coach. Bosses can be good in a coaching situation, but really sometimes you're going to need a confidential third party who can really help you assess in confidentiality. So I think getting coaching right from an early stage, when you're aspiring to be a leader and a manager, and just working out how you come out and how you are reflecting on others and your impact on others, is something you should start as soon as you can.
So if you don't have a coach, and there are things, well, one of the things I've learned from sailing is you have to be careful not to scare the crew. So there's things you can't tell the people who work for you that you're struggling with. Not personally, I mean, business-wise, there are things you can't share. And I would also say that there's probably things you don't want your boss to know, because it might change the dynamic somehow. And you might need somebody to talk to about that, right?
Absolutely. You can't talk to people in your team about some of these things. A lot of times it has to do with your relationship with your boss, and there's a difficult dynamic that you certainly can't talk to them about, at least the way you would with a coach. A coach can help you figure out how to have that conversation and how you can go about it in a productive way. But getting from your sort of initial reaction to the productive conversation, a coach can really help. Peggy, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I do, because I had a couple of questions that I wanted from the chat box that I thought we should address now, since they link to what you've already said. Question number one was, it was asked, can you have more than one, Myers-Briggs profile, or this is just one? What is your opinion?
Yeah, Myers-Briggs approach says the test results are only the guide based on the science of Myers-Briggs. You decide ultimately what your preferences are, and that may change. So you take the test, and then if you're unsure, it's kind of up to you and the practitioner to kind of help you figure out what it is. And if you need time to decide, maybe you're forever torn between E and I, and you don't know. That's okay. And sometimes your score, your assessment changes, but Myers-Briggs really teaches that it's really not you that's necessarily changing. It's the environment you're taking the test, and how you're answering the questions, and your approach that may change, or your clarity about yourself may change. But for the most part, if you get down to the real truth of it, you're going to come up with a consistent Myers-Briggs profile.
Okay.
So I think, if I can react to that for just a second, Brian, it's something you said to me about Stoicism. If you understand who you are presumed to be based on your Myers-Briggs, and you start working on it, and accept it, you're moving yourself down the road. So maybe you test one way, but you learn to work with it. You learn to accept things about yourself. I think that's part of the Stoicism idea that you use in your work.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of every Myers-Briggs profile is kind of, there's opposites. So you get the introvert preference and the extrovert preference. Well, I happen to be an introvert preference, but I need to sort of bring the extrovert in myself a lot of times. So I will work on that. I will probably never pass the test as an extrovert if I'm being honest, but I'll know that where my sort of opposite is and what I might need to do to show up differently when I need that other side, because there's no right or wrong answer. It's just your preferences and their opposite preferences. So everybody's going to be on different ends of the spectrum.
Okay, and another question that came in that was relevant to what you said, Matt asked you, what are excuses why people don't get coaches? And somebody said that they felt that their problem was a time factor, and they wanted to know if you had any suggestions. So you might want a coach and even might have somebody, they said, offer you coaching, but you can't figure out within your, life, so to speak. What is your recommendation?
Yeah, that's a great one. And that is probably one of the most common things, we all hear. We're all busy. Everybody's super busy. And that's one of the things I work with clients on. One of the most common things is, how do I do what I know is important, but isn't urgent? And, you've all seen the Eisenhower matrix: important, urgent, etc. Yeah, that's a tough one. And what I try to help my clients do is look back, kind of on a weekly basis and say, all right, look back over the week, think about what you've done and how much of it was more important than working on yourself, your leadership, and your next level, or your networking, Matt, if that's the thing you're working on, or your temper, or whatever it is you're working on. Yeah. And I think everybody's different. When can they find time to do whatever? Everybody's different. But one of the things I think is most important, it's kind of underrated, and everyone talks about time management, but using your time with intention and managing time I really use the word obsessive time management. Critical. It's critical.
There's a saying, there's never time to do it right the first time, but there's always time to do it over.
Right.
And I think having a relationship with a coach is one of those things that falls into this category. People say, well, I don't have time for that. I think it's probably one of the things you need to make time for.
Yeah, and that's easier said than done. So I could talk for hours about time management and what I do and what I like, and apps and approaches and tools. I mean, just to throw out something, I love time boxing. I use an app called Motion. It's expensive, but it puts your tasks into boxes based on priority. And I really am as maniacal about spending my time as anything, really purposely trying to make sure I'm doing what's important. So that goes to, how you plan your week and your time and what is important to you. But I think the quick answer is, just think about the things you're spending your time on across a week and the thing that you want to be developing yourself, and ask yourself, have you really spent time all week on things that are actually more important than developing yourself, and that you truly don't have time?
Okay, and then there was one question, somebody wanted to know, how do you vet a coach? There's lots of coaches. How do you decide this is the right coach for me? Somebody said, is it like dating? What is your recommendation? Yeah,
I think it's like speed dating. For me, I always have a relationship with a client, leading up to that. It doesn't just start with coaching. It starts with networking. It starts with people I know. It starts maybe casually. It starts as mentoring. You have to get to know it. It's a personal, right? You need to find the coach that resonates with you. I am definitely not the right coach for everybody. Probably a small group of people, or a subset of everybody, certainly. But I think I can't speak for every coach, but I can certainly speak for myself. We'd love to talk to people, just as you said, Peggy, before the show started. Just getting to know people and networking and hearing about challenges and what's going on in people's lives. I enjoy that. And sometimes that turns into a relationship and sometimes it just peters out. That's okay.
So just, pouring through your questions, what's the most important thing a coach can do for a leader? Is it the calming effect of stoicism? Is it time management, which you've been talking about?
Well, what I like to say is the most important thing they can do is help the leader perform at a higher level, achieve their goals of performance, business goals, objectives that they have. And there is an ROI. I mean, there's studies that show that there's an ROI for coaching. There's money to be made in higher performance. And even selfishly, there's promotions and better job satisfaction, but even unselfishly, organizations can profit through higher engagement, goals being achieved, people being more satisfied, people feeling invested in, people feeling like the leader's investing in their own growth is really helpful. Even if the leader makes no progress, it's helpful in that they're trying. But yes, what can you do? And now how do you do that? You turn in the mirror to the coachee, you're helping them see an angle that they can't see on their own as to how they're impacting others. So my goal is to help you see what you look like to me and probably others, and help you find a way to react differently or do differently with some of the challenges and the problems that you're having, and find a different way to approach them if that vision in the mirror doesn't look good, isn't something that you want.
Mm-hmm. So how do you've been a CFO? Is that your focus? Is that the type of coachee? I don't think that's a good word, by the way. But
Okay.
People you're and probably patient or client is not a good word either. But
Well, I think client is okay. I coach,
okay.
and I like to think of them
patient
as
is
client.
probably not the right word.
Patient, no, but client, they are a client. I
Yeah.
don't know. How do you feel about that, Mark? Do you see them as clients?
Brian, how do you feel? How do you feel about the people you're working with?
Yeah, I see. I think client is the right word. Certainly not patients or students. The coach is trying to draw out of the client what is right for them through examples, through questions, through shared experience. Yeah, I started as accounting and went into finance and was CFO and later CEO, and so people do see me as CFO. That's how they know me for the most part. I spent most of my career as CFO. So I do tend to talk to a lot of CFOs and resonate with CFOs, but that's not my sole focus. I love to help CFOs and anybody on this call. But it's really leadership at all levels. It's really anybody who's a leader, and I define a leader as anybody who's helping other people be better. And we're all leaders, just in different aspects. I don't see leadership as a position. I see it as a thing that is done either well or not well, or to some degree. So I'm not focusing just on CFOs, although I know a lot of CFOs, and I do have that experience that I can share with CFOs.
Things that you had to deal with when you were CFO.
Yeah. Yeah, we all know the CFO CEO relationship, for example, is a unique one, an important one, and an impactful one, a difficult one. And so everyone on this call probably knows that more than others not on this call. So that relationship I've lived, and I've got the scars to prove it. So I can help in a little bit more special way there, but it really isn't about me as much. So I want to, although my experience I think is important in my coaching, it's more about the client and what they are trying to do, and me helping draw it out and helping them sort of reshape kind of how they're seeing things and how they're seeing their options for their reactions. It's
not easy creating success in other people.
No, it isn't, but it's so rewarding, and in a way it's there. And if you can kind of have the right combination of listening and questioning and offering experiences, it comes right out. And I know I called my coach my secret weapon. I thought, oh no, I'm going to call him and I'm going to tell him what's going on. And then suddenly I said, wow, yeah, that's right. I could just do that. that makes sense. Why didn't I think of that? And I always said, this is my secret weapon, my thing that not a lot of people know about. It wasn't a secret, but it wasn't, a publicized arrangement, and I didn't talk about what we talk about.
Yeah.
But always felt like it was my little edge.
Yeah. But, when you're dealing with everybody's feelings, it's sometimes hard to develop the framework of what you need to do. You're too close to the problem.
Brian, I have a question. How are you finding that you need to coach people differently, or they're facing different problems now that they're having to be virtual leaders versus face-to-face leaders? And obviously a lot are really going to be living as hybrid leaders.
Yeah, I do, in that, like we were saying before, there's certain people that just believe in-person relationships are the only way to go, and all of this virtual stuff it has to be temporary so we can get back to it. And then there's others that think, hey, I can do everything virtually, but that creates issues. There's leaders that want everyone back in the office, and that's creating tension. And then we explore why is it important? What are we really trying to achieve? And so, yeah, that whole dynamic is a whole nother area of strain, debate, management challenge. I do believe it's the same stuff. It's almost, some of it's real, but some of it's kind of noise too, because it's down to connecting with people and helping people and holding people accountable, and communicating. And so it's all the same stuff. It's just now the forum is a little different.
I always view life as what is. There's lots of things you can change. And Brian and I share the famous sailors thing, which is you have to sail the wind you have, not the wind you wish you had, or the wind you deserve. You have to sail whatever's in front of you, you have to deal with. And I think leaders today are very challenged with this Zoom versus in-person situation. I worked at the Thompson Corporation in the 1990s, and they had an office in Stamford, Connecticut. So they hired a new boss, and he lived in New Jersey. Well, he couldn't get there. So they were talking about moving the office to Hudson Street in Manhattan. Well, Hudson Street, it's not the end of the world, but you can see the end of the world from there. And a lot of the people who worked in the Stamford office didn't live in Fairfield County. They lived much further upstate, and for them to get down to Hudson Street, but the leadership, they didn't even consider it. They were actually talking about moving the office to Hudson Street in Manhattan. And I think in the same context today, it's been 2 years. People have really settled into their new life.
Right. Yeah. I want to add, I found a quote. Matt has his quote about the wind, but I found a quote that was by a leadership trainer whose name is John Maxwell. And he said, the pessimist complains about the wind, the optimist expects it to change, and the leader adjusts the sails.
Yeah, I like
Brian
that.
I talked about that one too, but Brian, why don't you weigh in on it? I think, again, sailing is a metaphor for life. Go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, that wind comment quote was the one that I sent to Max. I knew he'd like that. Exactly. Expecting and hoping, those are two things, but dealing with the wind as it is the key, because that is what it is. And really being able to do that is tough. But to your question about video, Matt, I think it's not entirely generational, but it is to some extent. And there's just, Gen Z, Gen X, millennials, everybody, every new sort of wave of workers and employees creates a different expectation, improved or otherwise. And we're always kind of battling these differences. And so this is just one of them. To me, it's the same old stuff, but with a little different platform.
Yeah, well, it is what it is. We have to learn to deal with it.
That's right. That's right. And I think,
or to enjoy the benefit of it.
Yeah,
I think enjoy the benefit of, for example, Zoom. It's very efficient for many things. For other things, not so much.
Right. It has a place. And I think really for me, 80% of the time it's great. And that 20% of the time I can go and meet with people in person and develop those personal relationships and come back and pick them up on Zoom and I've hired people and left companies entirely with Zoom. I've been hired by individuals that I've then, left entirely, Zoom relationships starting and ending. And I think they were effective.
Why don't you develop a little bit more your idea about maniacal self-management? You mentioned it.
Yeah.
Why don't you develop it a bit?
In maniacal self-management is what I called it. I did a video on it a while back, and I do a video every Thursday morning on LinkedIn. If anybody's interested, they're short little videos, but I called it maniacal self-management. I got a pretty good reaction from that word, some negative and some positive. It's a pretty powerful word, right? To me, it means, just as we talked about, part of it is time management. Part of it is being obsessed with time management and really intentionally spending your time the way you need to, turning off email. Everyone knows email will just take you down a rat hole and your whole day will be gone. And you say, what'd you do today, Matt? Well, I answered my emails. Well, okay. But what did you really do? So time management's one of them. Starting with yourself, to your point about the wind. Yeah, your boss does this and she does that, but focusing on you and your behavior, your self accountability, your self awareness, and then tools. I talked about some of the tools like self coaching. I think self coaching is part of maniacal self management, in that you can use, like what I use, journaling as a tool. So I do it in the morning. You do it anytime, and I'm thinking about, how did it go? Sometimes I ask myself questions. I have a list of questions. These are good coaching questions, such as, what's working for you right now? What isn't working for you right now? And I'd be like, oh, what's not working for me is when I yelled at my daughter just because she, her room was messy and I maybe got a little too agitated. Well, that's not really working for me. Now she's upset. Or, I spent 2 hours watching TV last night and I should have prepared for this chat with Matt. Okay, it's not working for me. And so you can really, and I read, so journaling, but even further in journaling, another tool I like to use, and I read about this, Marshall Goldsmith is a famous exec coach.
Mm-hmm.
He has these, and it's what I do too, is I have roughly 20 things I'm working on, eating less sugar, not be taking things personally that as much, making sure I read enough. These are some of the things. And so every day I'm waking up in the morning saying, how did I do on that? And I score myself 1 to 10. And I just take an honest assessment. And as I'm scoring myself and I see the low scores, I'm like, what's up with that? And I'll just kind of write a little bit about it. And it helps frame what I want to do for the rest of the week. So maybe I need to do 3 hours of reading. Maybe I carve out a couple hours that next couple of days and make sure I do the reading I want to do, for example.
Do you think it's better if people who have accepted coaching let the people they work with and work for know about it, or is it better if they keep it just between the two of you? What do you find works best?
Yeah, I think the best approach, the kind of standard approach that I use, is we talk to the leader who wants to be coached, and then we talk to their constituents, maybe a couple of their team, their boss, whoever.
Oh, okay.
And we come up with a plan with the leader to certain things they want to work on, and they really should, but try to encourage them to share it with the team. Hey everyone, this is what Matt's going to work on. And we talked to Peggy and she said this, and we talked to Matt's team, and we talked to 5 members of the FANG, and we all think that Matt's agreed that he's going to work on whatever. And then they're the ones that judge whether or not Matt has made success. And that's I think of the most healthy kind of dynamic you can have. But it doesn't always work that way. It's not always appropriate, and maybe the situation's a little different, but typically that'd be how I'd want to do it.
Well, I think the 360 feedback approach is something that's important in any case, right? And that's hard to do if it's secret that you're working with someone.
That's right. And I remember in my management meetings, I would, and I'm sure we've all been there, beg for feedback. Hey guys, what do you think? What do you need? How can I help you? Crickets. Because people are worried about being on the spot, or they're worried about providing feedback. To your point earlier, it's hard for people to give because the power dynamic is such that the leader is so much position. It's hard to sort of take or for people to give feedback. So this is a confidential way to do it. It's a process where you can get that feedback. And that, along with the Myers-Briggs report and the 360 and what the leader's saying, should give you a nice view of what's important to work on that'll really make a big impact.
We've covered a lot of ground here, and we are open to questions. If you don't want to write them out, you certainly are welcome to turn on your microphone and jump in here. Otherwise, Brian and I are just going to keep talking.
Matt, I actually have one. Can you hear me? And just a quick question. My name is not showing up on my screen. Is it showing up on everyone else's screen, or am I doing something wrong in Zoom?
I don't know. Your name is showing up on the screen.
Okay, not on mine.
You're all set. It doesn't. It's only important that we know.
I know.
I assume you know who you are. Did you have a question for Brian?
Right. All right. So I want to go back to being stoic, actually, and you know, in this world we live in, I think it is important to show empathy, compassion, vulnerability as leaders, especially, I'm going to say, for finance leaders, because I've heard more than a few times that I don't have a heart, or, you know, I'm emotionless. All I can think about numbers, and they might be partially right, but I do have a heart. So I think it is important to achieve that balance of being still compassionate and showing emotion, but showing it in a controlled manner. That is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been there as well. And I think, you know, as I said, my Myers-Briggs preferences are INTJ, and the T stands for thinking versus feeling. So I tend to come off as a thinker and not as much of a feeler. Of course, I have feelings and emotions, and I get empathy, but it doesn't come out as upfront because of my preferences. So I've heard that as well. But absolutely, I think you being authentic to yourself is the key. Of course, too much self-deference and too much vulnerability can backfire depending on who your team is. But of course, being authentic to yourself and putting yourself out there is not perfect, and someone who's working on certain things. I always found one of the best things to do, you know, if I went and was in a meeting and maybe I got a little short, or as you said, I came off as a non-feeler, I'd come back around and talk to the people individually and say, look, you know, just have an honest conversation about how, you know, that's not how I wanted to come across. And I think just acknowledging things is so impactful. Think about how it helps when your spouse or whoever, or your boss does something that kind of bugs you, and then they acknowledge it. That's sometimes all you need.
Thank you.
I think what's true here is that if you're the CFO, you have a role to play. It may not be the real you, but you have an assigned role in this grand production, and you have to perform according to that role. That's the expectation, like being conservative about money, right? You're the CFO, you have the purse strings, and you better keep that purse string drawn really tight, or people will spend a fortune, right? Brian, why don't you weigh in here on people being different than their assigned Myers-Briggs and the need for that?
Yeah, absolutely. When and make no mistake, when I say, you know, helping others and being, you know, empathetic and compassionate for your team, and leaders are there to help others, it doesn't mean they're there to give them more money than is budgeted or give them a job that they aren't performing well in. That's absolutely not what it is. It's about helping them understand how to get to that budgeted number, or helping them understand why the budget is what it is and what the alternatives are. But yeah, absolutely, the CFO role is uniquely gatekeeper, sometimes the no sayer, the one that may often, and CEOs I've worked with, actually we team up and knowingly I'll be the bad cop and he or she will be the good cop, because that's the role that works for the organization. But even in being the bad cop, it's not being a bad guy or being mean. You're just trying to help people understand that they've got to make a serious choice or a difficult decision, or and why that's important, and helping them get there in that process. So it's not about, you know, giving away the farm or being overly generous. It's just about doing it the right way, so you get the best result. The people are happy and they stay and they help you. Because I don't know about, for me, it's been a long time since I've known every detail of all the financials. I rely on the team to help me. So if I want to go save money, for example, I've got to get them on board to help figure out where the money is, why we're doing it, why it's a good idea, how I can help them figure that out. So that's really the focus.
Another question that just came in was the difference between peer coaching and, you know, hiring a coach. And the question was, should you start with peer coaching, or should you start hiring a coach? And, you know, which comes first, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, I mean, I think peer coaching, coaching from your boss, those are all, if you have an organization that's trusting enough to peers can coach each other, that's beautiful. And that can be very helpful. But even then you're going to get a, you know, you're going to get one angle. So my answer would be get as much coaching from any angle you can, from your boss, from your peers, the feedback, and a professional coach, because you're going to get more than one angle. But if you're in an organization where peer coaching is working and helpful, to me, that says there's a lot of trust, and that's great.
Brian, I get that we're getting within 5 minutes or so of our end. I understand you do offer an introductory session, kind of a get to know you, which I think is a good idea for people to judge whether you're the kind of person they want to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't, there's no, right. I do offer introduction. I'd love to talk to anybody, anyone on this call. I'm talking to CFOs and CEOs and HR executives all the time. I always want to meet new people and develop relationships with them and hear what their challenges are and what they're doing. And if that turns into a coaching relationship, that's great. But I'm you know, always wanting to hear from new people as to what they're doing. And of course, it's just a conversation, no formal arrangements necessary.
So what is it exactly you think people can do on their own to improve their performance? Are there any particular books you'd recommend they absorb?
Yeah, you know, that's a tough one. I read a lot of books. Well, I read as much as I can, not enough. There's some
we
books.
talked about that earlier.
Yeah, that's right. The right answer
Not
is
enough
not
networking?
enough. No. Yes, networking, but never enough. But books,
Never enough.
you know, it's hard because every situation is different. There's a lot of books out. I'm reading a book called The Management of the Absurd right now. It's a relatively older book. I think it's fascinating. The little book of Stoicism I've given to people, and they've really loved it. They didn't know anything about Stoicism, so it's an easy little read. The Daily Stoic that is done by Ryan. I gotta forget his last name. The Daily Stoic talks about Stoicism. But I think on your own, it's really trying to figure out how you're showing up. So to me, it would be the journaling, the quiet reflection, the scoring, and really trying to do that consistently to where you can see yourself where you're, you know, what's not working for you, for example, and what is working for you. Take some coaching questions and ask yourself those questions on a regular basis.
Brian, some people want to know, how should they reach you if they do want to have this initial conversation? Just from your email on this, is that the best way?
That's the best way. I have a website called stoicexecutive.com. So STOIC executive.com, one word. There's my information's all on LinkedIn as well, Brian Frohn on LinkedIn, but that's my email. That's what you're going to see everywhere. As far, so just send me an email and I'd love to, and I'll set up a meeting. And I also have a scheduler on my website. So if you just go and pop a meeting in that's convenient, that also works.
Right, Brian, just so everyone knows, Brian is a member of our networking group, and you can look him up on that basis. But his full contact information was in the meeting announcement. And I believe even past meetings are on the website, at least for a few weeks. And if you need to reach Brian, you can always contact me and I'll put you in touch with him. If all else fails, it's 1-800-MATT-BUD.
Perfect.
All right, we're drawing down to the last 4 minutes. We welcome a few last questions from the studio audience. Please have at it. Even Peggy, you can join in here. You're into this whole communication and coaching thing.
Well, again, I guess I'm going to go back to my earlier question about leadership styles. And, when you're coaching somebody, if let's say, from my perspective, as we're moving into more virtual, that we should be more transformational than transactional, yet a lot of leaders are transactional. You want to weigh in on that?
Yeah. I had a colleague one time a while ago. I was trying to get him to do something, or agree to something. I was the CEO at the time, and he was one of my vice presidents. And he said, "Oh, Brian, you're being so transactional." And I never forgot it, because I was just there trying to get him to do a thing, and I wasn't thinking about what he's looking for and how to help him, and how to, how he could understand what I was trying to do. And maybe what I was trying to do was not the best answer. He had a better answer, but I was too. So transactional can, and Matt and I talked about attachments and unhealthy attachments, and sometimes our attachments.
Oh, yes, we didn't talk about unhealthy attachments. Gosh,
Yeah. Well,
damn it.
That leads to being transactional. When you just, come on, Matt, we just need to do this, and you're kind of missing the broader picture, or a new answer, or a different answer. But I think online, I think that the concepts are the same. It's just there's a little more difficulty in relationships potentially. But really, it's people. I think that the fundamental communication and connecting with people and helping others is really the same dynamics. It's just a different kind of medium now that's creating different kind of challenges, but it's the same stuff. So being transactional, to me, I've been called that before, and it was very illuminating.
Yeah, sometimes people actually tell you things that you should know, and that you kind of know, but you didn't think about it. And it changes your behavior from that point on. How cool is that?
That's rare. This guy was great in that way. He's rare. I was lucky to have him do that, but that's not the norm. Most people would say, "Oh, this guy's being transactional," and then pack it away and go be disengaged somewhere. So that's why it's so important that you see these behaviors and make sure you're on top of it.
Okay, but I think there was a last question, Peggy.
Yeah, there was one question, the last question. It said, what do you suggestions do you have for assessing fit when evaluating a new opportunity?
This is something I work with clients. I think you're talking about a new job opportunity, right?
I don't know. It was a question in the chat box.
Oh,
I think it was
You can take it
Joyce.
any way you want.
Joyce, do you want to speak to that because you wrote the question? I'm not going to
Yes,
try
thank you. You were exactly right. It's when in assessing a job opportunity, how might you do that?
one thing I try to help
of leadership styles.
Yeah, what I try to help my clients do is really just dream up what exactly they want. A lot of people are looking at job opportunities and they don't know really what they want, and I try to help them figure out what is the ideal situation, taking out anything you think is a weakness or you can't do. If you could be wildly successful, what do you want to do, and how does this job line up with it? And of course, talking to people and interviewing, you get a sense of who you're going to jive with or not. It's like dating. So if you're getting a good feeling and it's something that's in line with, you've done the work to figure out, yeah, I really want to do this. I really want to specifically go after this kind of work, knowing that without the sort of limitations of will I be successful or am I going to be good? Because then you start to pack in your own concerns, and now you're not really thinking about exactly what you really want to do.
Thank you.
You know, if I could just add to this, when I talk to candidates I'm presenting to my clients, I always tell them that it's always about the people.
Indeed.
When you're examining a job, if these are not your people, if they don't have your ethics and to a degree your style, I think those are red flags. You're not going to be happy. Brian?
Totally agree. It's relationships. It's your job is just, each of your individual relationships and how those are going and how you're doing with those. I mean, that's generally what it is, especially when you're in management and leadership. It's all about the relationships, the people.
All right, well, we're at the end of the hour and meetings start on time and end on time in my world. I want to thank Brian. We had a great conversation. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we sign off?
Just
Something we
thank
forgot to
you.
cover?
Thanks for everyone for the questions and coming in and having a great conversation. I really appreciate it. And I hope to hear from every one of you after this call at some point.
Okay. Well, thank all of you for joining us on Chat with Matt. I'm going to try to dig up some
Thank
other
you,
people.
Brian. Thank you, Peggy.
Okay, I'm going to try to dig up some other people who have something to say, and we'll if you enjoyed this conversation, please know it will be on our website and our video resources tab, as our other conversations I've had with important people. And Brian, again, thank you for taking the time to present to our membership. So stay well, everybody, and we'll see you again on Chat with Matt.
Thank you. Take care, all.
Bye, thank you.